Please first allow me to welcome you all to Palau. We are truly honored to have you visit Palau for the 4th Pacific Islands Parliaments Group Conference. We are very honored for your presence this morning. So to begin our program today, I'd like to invite to the stage Padre Rusk Saburo of the Palau Catholic Mission to offer us a prayer.
God has shaped and formed us into His people. Grant, Lord, that we may do your will in all things and so remain close to you. Let us pray. Almighty and ever-living God, we give you thanks for the many and varied ways you build and protect your people. We ask that you bless these officers of our lawmaking bodies. Grant, Lord, that through their vision and direction, they may be of service to our respective islands and peoples, and that we all bring honor and glory to your name. Grant this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Padre Rusk Saburo. And now, to signify the beginning of this conference, I'd like to ask a young man from Palau to perform a customary tradition which signifies the beginning of a significant event, to be followed by a traditional chant. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Olgaril Ise. Big round of applause for Mr. Ise. At this time, I'd like to invite to the stage the Honorable Sabino Anastasio, Speaker of the House of Delegates of the Republic of Palau, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Ale. I would like to begin this welcoming remark by recognizing the traditional chiefs of the Republic of Palau. There's Abdul and Raklay, and the members of the Council of Chiefs. I also would like to recognize the Masil Belau, or the women's group in Palau. We have sitting there is Pilung, and Emil Clay. And they represent the other groups of women all over the state of Palau. I'd like to take this, recognize His Excellency, President of the Republic of Palau, Surang Luis Jr., Honorable Presiding Officers of the Palau Pacific Legislatures, Honorable Members of the Parliaments, Congresses, and Assemblies, Delegates, Senators, esteemed colleagues, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor to welcome all to the fourth conference of the Pacific Island Parliaments Groups, PIPG, on behalf of the Congress of Palau. We are thrilled to host this important gathering in our beautiful island nation, and I warmly welcome each one of you. Mr. President. We are meeting at a crucial time for the Pacific region. This year's conference theme, Human Development in Oceania, how can legislatures strengthen people-centered security for Pacific Islands, focuses on some of the biggest challenges we have faced today. As the world attention increasingly turns to the Pacific, it is important that we as legislators are ready to guide our nations through these times of change and opportunity. The Pacific Island Parliamentary Group plays a unique and vital, bringing together legislative bodies from both the South and the North Pacific. The Congress of Palau has actively worked to bring about this unity, and this is why PIPG has invited members of the Association of Palau Island Legislatures, or APIL, to join this conference as observers. Some of them will, I hope, join the PIPG in the near future. This unity allows us to work together on regional issues as they are also addressed by the PIF. Share best practices, tackles common challenges, advocate more effectively for our interests, both regionally and internationally. By encouraging dialogue and cooperation among our legislatures, PIPG strengthens our institutions, supports democracy and democratic values, contributes to the sustainable development and peace in the Pacific Islands. The Pacific Islands tend to sometimes focus on the bigger pictures. The context is indeed crucial. While foreign powers take an increasing interest in the Pacific, we should always keep our people in mind. Strategic challenges, first and foremost, have an impact on human lives. We need to address them together, to be strong together when looking to and dealing with our partners outside. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the generous support by the government of Japan through the project strengthening of the legislatures in the Pacific Island countries, implemented, of course, by the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, which made this conference possible. In conclusion, as we begin these important discussions, let us remember the words of our ancestors and the legacy we uphold to future generations. Together, through shared wisdom and collective action, we can assure a secure, prosperous, and sustainable future for all the Pacific Islanders. Thank you, and I wish you all productive and meaningful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Anastasio. And now at this time, I'd like to call to the stage His Excellency Surangal S. Whips Jr., President of the Republic of Palau, to deliver an opening address.
Ali, malungil tutaw. Otrule susirgidan moray budul ma rubuk kaldew ma adar orior ma raklay marubul belar rogui. Dire kartu bet susirgidan morga bilung mose amna tera la tutalo banget tera bi raklay ma susirgidan morabek masil belam. E nga mo truge bilung e madur toram rigera okyak sangargida di adarangot al belum. Di malungil tuta President of Senate, Hokons Paules, marugul senators, Speaker Anastasio, marugul delegates. And we are extremely honored this morning to have the entire Pacific parliamentarians group membership here in Palau, and to be able to host such distinguished guests. So, Ali, and welcome to Palau. Today is really, truly a historic event. You know, it marks the fourth Pacific Parliamentary Group meeting, and I believe the first time that it's been assembled here in the North Pacific, and first time, of course, in Palau. I had the opportunity of being a senator for 8 years, and you know, one of the things that I envied was that the executive branch had the PIF, but the parliamentarians, as far as Pacific, weren't getting together. So this is really, I think, historic that you have organized this group, because there's nothing more important than building collaboration and cooperation between the one Pacific continent that we are a part of. Today, there's 18 different members of this association from across the Pacific here with us. And of course, the theme today is human development in our Oceania. And truly, our most valuable resource is our people. And we must do all we can to ensure that they are our priority and always put first. In fact, when I ran for office, my theme that I used is people first. And I think that should always be top of mind in what we do. And all the activities and all the policies that we create are about putting people first at the end of the day. So, really the challenges that you'll be addressing today, food security, economic security, cyber security, are all challenges that I think we as Pacific Islanders know very well. When it comes to food security, I think during COVID, more than any, we realized how much we depend on imported foods and imported products. And when you're concerned about ships not arriving or planes not arriving, you also get concerned, well, how are you going to feed your people? So really now more than ever, it's important that we focus on continuing to build our resilience by using the resources that we have, ensuring that we can feed ourselves. Our Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries here says, our food is our responsibility. And, you know, one of the things that I'd like to share on when it comes to food security is we are big ocean states. And really the source of our food comes from our oceans. That's probably our biggest source of food. And in many cases, much of those resources are exported outside of our territory and not used within our territory to feed ourselves and to provide the economic security that we need. So one of the highlights that I'd like to share is that this last year at COP 28 at the UAE, as Pacific leaders, we got together and committed that we're going to unlock blue Pacific prosperity by committing to 100% management of our oceans and at least 30% protection to ensure that we sustainably use our oceans and so that we can continue to fish, but ultimately to provide for our people. And I think that was an important highlight in how we as Pacific brothers and sisters that share one ocean should work collaboratively to ensure that we can continue to use these resources for generations to come, to ensure that our people have food to eat. And I share that because, you know, one of the things that I recall when I was young is my father used to work for a copra plant here. He was a manager of it, and he got frustrated because they were underpaying him. So he said, I quit. Told my mom I quit, and she was a teacher at the Palau High School right up the street. And he said, I'm just going to be a fisherman. And we used to sell fish on the side of the street up here in front of Palau High School. But he had the opportunity to go fishing to provide for his family because those resources were there. And that's why it's so important that whether we're talking about food security, is that we ensure that we have sustainable practices, we protect our oceans so that we can continue to fish, continue to provide for our families, and continue to have those economic opportunities. And when it comes to our land, we have some of us big islands, we have small islands, but really understanding how we can farm better, sharing those best practices with each other, and not only focusing on agriculture, but also aquaculture. These are, I think, opportunities that we have, and I know many in the region are exporters. I know Fiji exports, Tonga exports food to other parts of the world, and we want to learn from each other. How do we develop our local production so that we can also be exporters and not only provide for ourselves? You know, one of the greatest challenges that I think we all have in the Pacific is economic security. And I think one of the challenges we have is out-migration. So many of our citizens end up leaving, whether to go to the United States, Australia, New Zealand, because they're in search of better economic opportunities. So when it comes to food security, when it comes to economic security, I think they're very much interlinked. How do we create those industries, build upon them, so that we can provide opportunities for our people so they can stay at home and really enjoy the opportunities that we have and build more resilient islands. One of the things that we do know is that we have the fish, we have land, we have unique things that we can sell, and we have beautiful islands that tourists want to come and visit. I think one of the challenges that we have is sometimes that bridge in the sky or the bridge on the ocean to get our products to market or to bring people to visit us in a way that can help promote the development of our islands. So it's important for when we are in these fora to try to find ways that we can work together. One of the countries that I admire, and congratulations to Air Fiji for really the success of their airline. I saw how much money they made last year, so that's we should applaud them for that. But having your own airline and be able to find the markets and bring the tourists there, but really having Pacific carriers work together to get our islands more accessible so that we can take advantage of the tourism that's out there to help our people. These are opportunities that we need to work collaboratively with. When it comes to economic opportunities, the World Wide Web has opened the opportunity to be anywhere and to have companies anywhere and to work remotely. But at the same time, it's also made us vulnerable. And Palau in the past years has seen 3 cyber attacks, one to immigration, finance, and our police. We also realize that with these opportunities comes vulnerability. And we've also learned that you need to partner, you need to learn. So what are those challenges that we have? How do we protect ourselves so that we're not vulnerable to those attacks? And probably most importantly, we all, as Pacific Islanders, understand the greatest threat that we have, which is climate change. We're already impacted by the storms, by sea level rise, by droughts, and coral bleaching and everything that's threatening food security and our way of life. And, we try to make progress economically to move forward, but then a natural disaster comes and we're back and we're restarting. So our united voice is so important to the world to help them understand the challenges we face and why it's important for everybody to take action, and especially our united voice can really help amplify and help those larger nations really take responsibility. We are living in a complex global world. We see the challenges that are happening in Europe and of course in the Middle East. And the last thing we want to do is see that happening in our part of the world. And I think what we all know is that we want to promote freedom, democracy, and peace. Really the Pacific should be an area of peace. We all lived through World War II and we don't ever go back there. And we have to work together to ensure that we provide peace in this region, because that's the only way that we can have the economic security and prosperity that our people need to succeed. I was thinking about what I was going to share this morning, and really the role of legislatures are really the cornerstone of helping solve these issues. It's coming up with policies that are help us become more accountable, more responsive to our people's needs, and help further economic growth. And I just want to share one experience I had as a parliamentarian. In 2013, I had the opportunity as a senator to visit the Cook Islands and New Zealand. And the reason we went as parliamentarians was to understand the value-added tax system. And I think that's just one example of how we collaborate and cooperate and learn about best practices. The IMF had told us, you need to go to New Zealand and the Cook Islands because they're the best example of implementing a value-added tax system that is simple, that is equitable, that is responsive to the people's needs. And one of the things that we learned there was not only did they implement a value-added tax, they reduced salaries and wages taxes to help the people. So as Pacific Islands, one of the challenges we have is we have all these tourists that are coming in. And what we learned from when we were in the Cook Islands in New Zealand was by having a value-added tax, now you capture more from the foreigners that visit your shores. And so it's sharing that information, learning how, and why is that important? Because then we use that to improve our healthcare systems, we use that to improve our education systems, so that we can provide better opportunities for our people. And that's really what it should be about. You know, people don't like taxes, and that's probably the biggest complaint that we have at home, because we had to go through this painful process in these past 2 years. But at the end of the day, why do we collect taxes? The taxes is really a system of redistribution of wealth. It's taking the money, bringing it back, giving it back to the people to help improve their lives. And I think one of the things, at least through the tax reform that it was painful that we went through in Palau and that we're seeing the results of, is we were able to collect more from our visitors and in return help the lowest income earners at home hopefully be better off, help ensure that our retirement system is secure, and at the same time help those people that are most in need through social programs. And I think, you know, many times it's hard for us to grasp, and sometimes it's hard for us to make those changes. But as Pacific brothers and sisters, sharing ideas, learning about the challenges and struggles that we have, that's how we build more resilient, more productive islands and better islands for our citizens of the future. I just like to end with one last analogy, and this is something that a mentor of mine used to share, and he's an older gentleman. His name was Juan Tastic Anastasio, happens to be related to brother of our speaker, but he was a well-known orator and always shared laughter with everyone. His name was known as Fantastic. So he was sharing a story of a young man who was going to school during the Japanese period, and when the Japanese occupied Palau. And during that time, when they were in school, they were studying math, and this young man, his name was Ngirgo Tiling. That means he's always in front, or the leader. And he was in class, and the teacher said, well, it's math now, so I'm going to start asking questions, just drilling them before they start the math, arithmetic subject. So the teacher goes, just to review, what's 1 plus 1? And Ngirgo Tiling said, the answer is 1. So the teacher said, oh, he must have misheard. He didn't understand what I was saying. So he then repeated and said, what's 2 plus 2? And the teacher said, and Ngirgo Tiling quickly answered again, it's 1. Yeah. And the teacher was, by this time, getting a little bit agitated and not really sure what Ngirgo Tiling was up to. So he said, one more time, what's 5 plus 5? And Ngirgo Tiling said, before she ended, 1. So the teacher, by this time, and this was back in the 30s, so things were a little different there, had a long stick beside their desk, and said, okay, I need to go speak to this young man because I think he is making fun of me and not being respectful. So she approached the desk of Ngirgo Tiling and said, Ngirgo Tiling, why is it that every time I ask you, I ask what's the answer, and the answer is always 1? And Ngirgo Tiling, seeing that the teacher was a bit upset and had the stick, quickly said, teacher, please understand. I was at a meeting at the Abay. Abay is our men's meeting house in SR. And I heard the gentleman speaking, one of the chiefs speaking, and he says, SR is a very big state where the speaker is from. And there's over 500 people that live in all these villages. There's 6 different villages. And when they come together, he says, we are one. So I think today, you are all here. And we are one Pacific, sharing this one ocean together. And what we need to be able to do is understand the value of the resources that we have. We share these resources. We have to ensure that we use them sustainably for generations to come, to ensure our economic security, our food security, and our resilience, so that our people can continue to live prosperous lives in peace. So really, thank you. Welcome to Palau. Please enjoy our country, and we hope that you come back and visit us many more times. But Homan Masulang. Yeah.
Thank you, President Whips, for your remarks. And with that, that concludes the opening ceremony for today's conference. So if I could direct everyone's attention for a group photo, please. I've been instructed to facilitate a group photo, so if all the participants can gather. Okay, so for the first photo, we're asking that all the participants are able to be in the picture. I'm told the photograph will be taken right outside the left exit door. Once we complete the first photo with all the participants here today, the second photo will just be PIPG members only, and then we will return in here for the keynote address. Okay, so for the next group,
After thing, es que tengo dos que keynote, after keynote.
start the first session. With that concludes the brief opening ceremony. So I'd like to ask everyone to return to their seats and get settled in for the keynote address. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, we are preparing ourselves for the keynote address. I have the pleasure to introduce to you the keynote speaker for today. I present to you Dr. Robert Underwood, President Emeritus of University of Guam, former member of the U.S. Congress, Chair of the Pacific Center for Island Security.
Morning. I won't forget your story about us being one. That's a great story, Mr. President. Good morning. Hafede, Gininamin Manautoguahan, Ungil Tutao, Bonjour, and of course, good morning. It's a great honor and a privilege to be with you here this morning, and if you'll bear with me, I'll share some thoughts and some of my personal experiences. And in terms of examining not only who we are as members of Pacific Island societies, but the shared problems we have and shared perspectives that we have as inhabitants of this newly formed blue continent. Collectively, we inhabit the largest ocean in the world, and inhabit in this instance means more than just being there. We are from there. We're not from anywhere else. Our very existence, our past, and our future are inextricably bound to islands and the oceans that surrounds us and connects us. As indigenous peoples, we don't just live there, we are responsible for these islands, and we are commanded, it's a sacred responsibility to do our best for these islands. We are the past, and we are the present, and we are the future for these islands. The bonus in this sort of indigenous consciousness is that we are finally waking up to the reality that all of us are connected, and not just in the distant voyagers who originally came here and developed cultures and civilizations, but through our common future as inhabitants of the blue continent that we like to talk so much about these days. We have laid before us the topic of human security. That could mean many, many different things, and it will, depending upon whether you are the leader of a huge contract like France or the United States, thinking that you too are a Pacific Island nation. Whether you are a marine biologist specializing in the survival of coral reefs, whether you're a fisherman or fisherwoman, and who you are fishing for, a trader trying to find goods and imports and exports, or just an islander walking down the path trying to figure out whether you can plant taro the same way you used to. This morning I'll give you 3 ways of looking at human security from my own perspective, and admittedly, it is an American, Guamanian, Chamorro, and Micronesian experience, and I've occasionally crossed the equator to visit some of our southern cousins, all beautifully arrayed for us this morning. Like many of you, I am really a 20th century person. You remember the 20th century, don't you? All of you? I was born in the last century. I was even born in the first half of the last century. This not only makes me old, it leads me to adopt a certain worldview based on earth-shattering and shaping events like World War II, the Cold War, the rise of China. I came to maturity in the 20th century. And when I was asked in those days, in the 20th century, what are the major issues of our lives, I would have said the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, the Cold War, the threat of nuclear destruction. Our focus was on that conflict, and we thought of our lives as islanders as being secondary to those major issues. Our gaze was on military strategic solutions as the basis for our future security. That was what commanded our attention when asked about human security. In the 21st century, in the 21st century, I had the good fortune to go back to education and academia after a late 20th century excursion into politics, and I became president of the University of Guam. In that road, I told the Board of Regents, the faculty, and the students that I was just a 20th century person trying to educate 21st century students. 21st century students can be very challenging. They sometimes act like history began when they just showed up. You've all had that experience. And us gray hairs know that this is not the case and that history is complex. But they ignored that complexity and brought simple, not simplistic, but simple, refreshing answers to complicated questions. When asked what are the big problems that we needed to confront, they replied, water, food, trees, fish, oceans. They put coral reef survival and endangered species and endangered cultures and endangered languages at the forefront of their agenda. This agenda was not only simple and clear, it helped me understand the effects of globalization and the dynamics of agency and control and management at the local level. What are the things that matter to us? What are the things that should matter to us? They're actually pretty simple, according to the 21st century minds. How should we confront the challenges that we face in a manner that promotes local control and local agency and local solutions? These challenges were dramatically in play and in practice in my home island of Guam, where it isn't just political ideas and control which comes from elsewhere, but the capacity to be secure in food, in clean water, and the geography of the island itself as it faced the challenges of climate change. When we think of food security, as pointed out by President Whips Jr., and COVID dramatized that for many of you, in Guam we would run out of food in 2 weeks without outside relief. When we recognize that over 90% of our food comes from somewhere else, usually a land continent and not the blue continent. These young people helped us realize that food security is not enhanced by importing more abundant cases of Spam and corned beef. They helped us recognize that. My 20th century brain started to recalibrate my assumptions and my priorities. The other recalibration, the second recalibration, came out of a different set of ideas about seeing myself as an islander and being island-centric in my worldview. In my profession as a teacher and as an educator, I spent 10, 15 years being a consultant and teacher training and teacher education in all parts of Micronesia. When I became University of Guam Academic Vice President, I tried to restate and reorient the University of Guam's own position in Micronesia. And I then also, when I went to Congress, I helped form the Congressional Asian Pacific American Caucus and advertised the role of Pacific Islands in U.S. policy, even becoming chair of that Congressional Caucus, which was actually primarily oriented around the experiences of Asian Americans. I always knew I was an islander, but I wasn't sure that I was island-centric. And that's a different kind of view. This viewpoint has strained the mental imagination of islanders and literally tried to redraw the map. We tended to see ourselves as being somewhere else. This is encompassed by crazy sloganeering as occurred in Guam. Maybe many of you have seen the sign, Guam, where America's day begins. Really? Is that really true? And anyways, that slogan was ripped off, I would say, borrowed from Wake Island. Wake Island used to have that slogan, but Guam then co-opted it for itself. And Guam, America in Asia. The latter was a futile, unimaginative effort to try to see Guam as the basis from which American companies could conduct their business in Asia. It's a step up from seeing Guam as the last American frontier or the westernmost outpost of the United States, but it simply accepted the globalized view of the world in a different but equally disempowering perspective. Dealing with this required imagining entities, island entities, in their own reality rather than as being adjuncts to continents external to the region. So, many of you, and it started actually in the early 90s, the concept of nisology started to arise in academic thinking. That is, that islands have their own rhythm. They have their own cadence. They have their own way of dealing with human relationships. And they can only be successful when we remember that. And so that nisology was first organized by, or first called upon by anthropologist Grant McCall when he first used the term in a conference in 1994. We thought of being small and remote and insular. In fact, if you were from the 20th century, if someone said to you, don't be so insular in your thinking, that would have meant you were narrow-minded. You weren't broad-minded. You couldn't imagine what was beyond you. But today, we think being insular is smart, is good, is the way to go. And so that really also is a change and a recalibration. I was away in Washington, D.C. during the 1990s, but I did get an invitation to address the Small Island Development States meeting at the United Nations General Assembly. And so this organization was reflective of that. And it came to me also personally through a friend in Okinawa by the name of Dr. Hiroshi Kakozu, who started in trying to apply that. I went to Okinawa, and he was saying, for the first time, I really never really thought about it that much, but he was trying to compare the problems Okinawa had with Tokyo, and I said, you know what? That's the same thing Guam has with Washington, D.C., and he was struggling to find their own rhythm and their own cadence. And it eventually emerged in what is now the University of Ryukyu's common line, which is island wisdom for the world and for the future. And this reversed the kind of thinking that actually things could come out of the island. So this was an attempt to flip that script that many of us had been used to, and we must flip that script today, not just intellectually, but in legislation and initiatives like those suggested in the Whangatapu Declaration. That's really flipping the script. I used to work on cultural and linguistic issues for the Pacific Islands, particularly North Pacific, but this was my introduction into economic, social, and political issues. And so I looked to regional organizations to do that, to find a way to act as one in order to build up a corpus of regional thought and philosophy encapsulated by terms like the Pacific Way and organizations like the Pacific Island Forum and the Pacific Community, most of which were admittedly south of the equator. The only difficulty that I found in trying to embrace that was not just the fact that I was from north of the equator, but the fact that non-Pacific actors do not subscribe to the Pacific way. There is no Pacific way to energy independence. There is no Pacific way to clean water. There is no Pacific way to military strategy, or so it seems. At least that was kind of like a disjuncture in my thinking. So I tried to figure out how to take on those environmental challenges. And so when the University of Guam started a major initiative, we called it the Center for Island Sustainability. We didn't call it the Center for International Sustainability. We didn't call it the Center for Global Sustainability, or, as some might have suggested, the Center for American Sustainability in the Pacific. We had totally changed our thinking. After years of inactivity in the Pacific Regional Environmental Programs, PREP, in which Guam had a seat but did not participate much, I asked the legislature in Guam to give that seat to the University of Guam, and we did. We took the seat. All of this ended up in aspirational and reimagined characterizations of the Pacific Islands. This has resulted in this vibrant conversations about the Blue Continent and honoring and protecting the Blue Continent, and even planning around the Blue Continent, notably the unveiling of the 2050 strategy for the Pacific Blue Continent by the Pacific Island Forum. While we want to include everybody in the Blue Continent, we don't really know what to do about territories. It's unclear. They're mentioned, but, you know, some of you have suggestions and some of you have taken direct action on your own. Or how to deal with non-Pacific entities, which are large and influential, whether it is China or the United States or European countries. So my third recalibration involved the reemergence of an old 20th century type crisis, which has surfaced in the past few years, and the 21st century challenge to our very existence as islands. Most of us are justifiably focused on the 21st century existential crisis for the world, for the Pacific, and for our islands, and climate change, and ocean warming, and rising sea levels, and coral bleaching in combination forms an existential threat that goes far beyond the average ordinary crisis. It threatens our islands. It threatens us as people. And in this, and like so many challenges that we face, we are truly victims of these challenges. We certainly didn't cause this threat, but it is here nevertheless. It is undeserved. It is unmerited, but it's looking at us right straight in the face. Let's see if we can show you a little visual here that shows you where it is.
Someone was there. Good morning, Trey. Good morning, Michael. So this is on the island of Borneo in the Marshall Islands.
What he's trying to say is, this is really interesting. Okay, so that video on the wave action in Kwajalein was dramatic.
Waves literally busting down the door.
He agrees with me.
This morning, terrifying and dramatic moments caught on camera as an extreme wave hits a U.S. military base. Force of the water so strong it plows right through the glass doors, taking 2 people with it. Others stunned, climbing on tables. Then another wave rushing in, now taking out the windows. pitching them into darkness as the lights go out. It happened at a military base in the Pacific Ocean's Marshall Islands, a tiny nation considered the front lines of climate change. Rising sea levels are leading to powerful waves of flooding.
Say the average wave. If there are multiple wave sets, then it's possible
Okay.
that the can just double in it.
All right, thank you for that. There's a couple of interesting things about this. Am I echoing like the guy? Okay. The most interesting thing about this, of course, is that it dramatized the effects of climate change by that kind of wave action. They've had king tides in the Marshall Islands before, where the ocean level rose, but nothing quite that dramatic. The second part of that is even more dramatic and more interesting, is that because it happened at a U.S. Army base on Kwajalein is why the world is watching that. That's really the bottom line of that. If that happened and not happened on Kwajalein and had not happened on a U.S. Army base, that wouldn't have made national or international news. So for me, this existential threat sharpened and validated the focus on water and food and land and reefs and fish, and this ocean, this challenge of climate change revealed the gargantuan nature of this threat while it simplified the items. We should be taking action on our everyday lives as islanders. But just around the same time, the past few years, it's almost like, for those of you that are from the 20th century, it's almost like disco was making a comeback, or James Bond was remembered as our hero in the Cold War. All of a sudden, strategic competition started to become a major item in our lives. And it made a claim on our attention as islanders, even especially if you were receiving your information from Washington, D.C., or London, or Paris, or other places like that. So the strategic competition between China and the United States and the use of the islands as the backdrop for that competition has surfaced. I realize and accept that it is unfair and unreasonable to simply ask Pacific Islanders, especially Pacific Island nations, to just choose a side and go with it. To add another to unfair and unreasonable, it is unconscionable to again impose this kind of competition on island nations which did not cause the current competition. Just like climate change, we are not responsible for creating the challenges caused by strategic competition. But we are called upon to react and to help solve, or at least take efforts to protect our island. In this sense, the other that we must also add to it is that it is unrealistic to simply say, we don't want to get involved. That's not really much of an option. We inhabit and we represent small Pacific islands, proud of our connections and part of a geographic expanse which has been traversed by non-Pacific worlds for a lot of reasons, not interested in us as people, but interested in us as places and bases to operate from in the pursuit of other agendas. This has been our common legacy since the advent of colonialism. But it is a legacy that doesn't have to be our future. We are more than just bases. We are places with names that came from our imagination and our lips. And I want to think that we're more than just outposts. We're going to take chance on another video here. I happen to live, about 5 miles from Anderson Air Force Base. So this is a sobering video, okay? But I wouldn't call it, of course it's not fake news, but it is sort of shaped news, if I could use that phrase. The news that we're getting about this is sort of being shaped. This was preceded, there's a number of these YouTube videos about the attack on Guam, and I'm always left to wondering, who puts these videos on and what are they trying to tell us? Are they trying to pass on information? Are they just trying to get us to accept every military plan that comes along in the name of defense of our island? And are we a target because we're just naturally a target, or are we a target because the U.S. bases happen to be there? So those are serious issues. And so, in a sense, collectively, to borrow from President Whip's very interesting story, collectively we're all one. Of course, we're all outposts, but some like Guam more so than others. And I have to preview this with an experience I had about 6 years ago. I was visiting China when I went on a circuit of visiting 3 different Chinese universities, and I was well treated. And at that time, in response to some crisis, these B-52s, which were flown to Guam, and they were ostensibly there to deal with the Chinese threat in case something happened. So I was sitting there watching the Chinese news along with 2 presidents of different Chinese universities and watching how that was portrayed as from their point of view, as an assault on China, as a threat on China. So the end result of all this, of course, has been the increased capacity of China to retaliate in kind, and using Anderson as the main background. Now, after, and maybe some of you know this, the USS Blue Ridge arrived in Palau 3 days ago, and the Blue Ridge is here, still here, and is the command ship of the 7th Fleet based in Yokosuka, Japan. And Vice Admiral Catcher said, "We look forward to the opportunity for our team to meet with Palauan leaders, engage with the community, and experience Palauan culture and hospitality. During the port visit, 7th Fleet and Blue Ridge leadership will meet with key local leaders, I'm sure some of you have already met with them, to discuss ways to further advance U.S.-Palau cooperation and strengthen regional activity." Now, I wouldn't say that they're here for cultural tourism exactly, but it's a bonus for that. And one of the things that we tried to do in our Pacific Center for Island Security is to kind of tap into what is really the background for some of this. And it is historian Greg Fry from Australia reminds us that we have to stop thinking that strategic competition is just something that's being dealt with in defense agencies in Beijing and Washington, D.C. He reminds us that the claims of empires are often best tested in their remotest outposts. One can adapt this logic to the case of great powers in lieu of empires, and today most of those remote outposts are islands. So the USS Blue Ridge is the first time that this kind of visit has occurred, and is insightful, is indicative of how insightful Greg Fry's admonition was in terms of finding out the true nature of large political powers exerting their influence in the most remote outposts. So the 21st century crisis for us is 2 crises. We have climate change, and we have military strategic competition. These twin towers of crises are not just to be evaluated in terms of their immediacy, but how they both endanger our continued existence in the blue continent. I can't say which one poses more danger. I don't think they can easily be compared. They're both dangerous, and they cannot be ignored. But they do require different kinds of action. So this takes us to the theme of this conference and many others around the region, and that is human security. So human security is defined in many different ways. For most of it is maintaining the continuance of our people in their home islands. And being secure in your home island requires as much independent action and as much local management of resources and livelihood, even in the midst of an interdependent world. The opposite of human security is human insecurity, which is predicated, which is built upon external control or the lack of ability or capacity to provide oneself with the necessities needed for human life. In the case of Pacific Islands, this is inextricably bound with geography and geology and the physical capacity of islands. And as that physical reality is threatened and altered by climate change, then human insecurity increases. All of this is carefully articulated and documented in your Whangatapu Declaration. The identification of the conditions which arise from dramatic climate change and reminding the world that the vulnerable communities who have historically contributed least to current climate change are disproportionately affected. Those are the Pacific Islands. When that physical reality as islands is also manifested as seeing venues from which to conduct war or to obstruct our opponents, our island insecurity increases, even as perhaps the security of larger powers is thought to be maintained or stabilized. But the Whangatapu Declaration makes no mention of this potentially destructive reality and very real crisis. Perhaps now is the time to consider this matter of how the Blue Continent should respond to great power, conflict, and competition. And when we do, we have to engage in persistent and consistent dialogue about what each of these twin crises presents us with. We must increase our knowledge and our scientific, cultural, traditional, political, and military strategy. And we have many opportunities to recover and build this knowledge, but it must begin with our own institutions of education, in our own villages, in our own mental spaces, and in our imagination as islanders. This knowledge must be put to work in projects around the Blue Continent. This knowledge must be available everywhere and in abundance. And as we build that knowledge, we build our capacity to manage our own islands and engage with the broader world from a position of strength rather than a position of weakness. The main strength is islands have, and one that they must exercise judiciously, and I spoke about this to the Palau Council of Chiefs 2 months ago. I called it the power of saying no. The power to say no. Even territories can say no, even if they don't have internationally recognized authority like independent nations. They have the capability of refusing a plan that they are uncomfortable with or unsure about. Now, you don't say no all the time like a 2-year-old. You have a 2-year-old. They're saying no all the time. And there's people in our island societies who say no to everything. But that's not the kind of no I'm talking about. Saying no should be used judiciously, and it should be available, and for your own self and for your own future. Real human security can be built on knowledge and management of resources, and for small islands, exercising the power of saying no at the right time and to secure the right result. For this to happen, we have to look at deliberative bodies like legislatures and parliaments. Real democracy is practiced in open forums with advocacy and deliberation in a way that all of us can see. Now, I won't say that executives are incapable of this, especially in light of President Whip's presence here. But you know, the inclination of executives is to have internal conversations and then kind of announce their decision. This is why a group like PIPG and APIL are so critical. This is why they are essential to Blue Continent definition and advocacy. Human security is not to be found in weapons of war or in scientific calculations measuring the impact of climate change. Human security is based on the fundamental belief that humans have dignity and are entitled to manage their own affairs on their own terms. To frame all of this, as has been done with the Whangatapu Declaration, as matters of human security, is also to remember that at the base of this security is respect for human dignity. Human dignity in the places that they inhabit, human dignity in the relationships that they have within island societies, and especially with the non-Pacific, non-island world. Human dignity that comes from the voices of ancestors and in the hopeful eyes of young children. Every generation, no matter, I know that many of you are from different generations, but every generation is commanded to put this agenda of human dignity at the forefront of their purpose and their activities. For someone in my generation, it is trying to assist succeeding generations. For today's younger generations, it is to remember that history didn't begin today, but that historical decisions can be made today. Exercise that power. Sidus Masi Mesulang. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Underwood, for the keynote address. Before we continue our program, please allow us a moment to bid farewell to President Whips, where he has other engagements for today. Let's give him a big round of applause for joining us today. Let's also take a moment to bid farewell to Senate President Paules and Speaker Anastasio for joining us today. Okay, so if I may direct your attention to the agenda. I hope everyone was able to get a copy of the agenda for the conference. If you take a look at the agenda, you'll notice that over the next few days, we will explore topics related to people-centered development and human security amidst global challenges, discussing how global trends affect human security in the Pacific. We will look at challenges and strategies for ensuring food security and nutrition in the force of pressure. We will discuss ways for Pacific communities to address cybersecurity challenges, gender-based violence, and illicit drug trafficking. Finally, we will strengthen our collaborative efforts moving forward by discussing the future of legislative cooperation in the Pacific. We will also have the chance to visit sites related to the topics of our sessions, and enjoy an off-program excursion to further enrich our understanding and build camaraderie. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you once again for your participation in today's conference, and I now hand over the conference to the chairman, Delegate Marino.
Thank you, MC. Before we begin, let me just give a short summary of our first session for this morning, kind of, setting the tone and our mindset focused on what's going to be the topic of discussion. This session aimed as setting the scene for the whole conference, defining human security and human development, and presenting the main strategic challenges that the Pacific Islands are currently facing. It also aimed at establishing the intertwined linkage between the large picture and sometimes more technical development issues that are directly affecting the Pacific Island lives on a daily basis. So having said that, let me begin by first, I really want, with my heartfelt, welcome to the members and all distinguished members of the PIPG delegation who are here with us this morning. I also want to extend the same welcome to the member of APIL, which is the sister organization, I would say, of PIPG, which is basically in the north. We had our two sessions these last 2 days. We concluded it last night, and most of them are here with us this morning as an observer. I also want to welcome all distinguished guests, dignitaries, and everyone to the conference, to the fourth conference of the Pacific Island Parliamentary Group. Our first session for today, which is titled People-Centered Development, Human Security, Pacific Island Countries and its Global Challenges. Having said that, let me first introduce our first speaker for this session, Ms. Saya Welter, coordinator for the Pacific Island Law Officers Network. You have 10 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Chairman, Honorable Marino, honorable members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the invitation to the Pacific Island Law Officers Network to attend this very distinguished gatherings of parliamentarians and everyone working in this parliament space. As of today, no one from the Pacific Island Law Office or PILON has been invited to speak at this very important forum, and it's my honor to present and inform to you the work of PILON, to address and share with you on the work that we have prioritized on the balance of security, which is too often threatened, and human rights, which are also too often denied. PILON also shares the same aim with PIPG, and we're very happy to acknowledge that we both foster cooperation and collective action amongst our Pacific Island countries to tackle and address the presenting issues that pose significant threats to our region, and there is nothing beyond our capacity if we work together. I stand before you as the first speaker, and I don't know if it's a good thing or bad, but if you can see, I think I'm gonna die of being so scared. And in this distinguished hall, I'm a Pacific Islander, raised in these islands, and I've lived and worked in the islands, and I've seen and witnessed the many changes we have weathered throughout our lifetime. I agree with what the President have just mentioned in his sentiments, that our most valuable resource is our own people. And so today's topic of people-centered development with reference to human security, addresses the diversity of our region, Pacific Island countries, amidst the global changes and challenges, which is even more relevant with a time of changes for the Pacific, and also more relevant to the work that we do. Our network is made up of law officers from 19 Pacific Island countries, including Australia and New Zealand, and we contribute to a secure Pacific by advancing key law and justice issues, which is more significant to the many and challenging changes of today. When I speak of senior members, senior law officials, we are referring to attorney generals, solicitor generals, director of public prosecutions, secretaries of ministries of justices, and many more. That's our membership for Pilon. And we have identified 3 main areas of priorities: corruption, cybercrime, and sexual and gender-based violence. And these 3 strategic priorities, Pilon has formed 4 working groups. One of them also was the Pacific Legal Drafting Committee, or working group, that assists our working groups with their drafting of legislations that persist to our 3 priorities, as I've just mentioned. So for the first working group that we have, our work on corruption, we all know that corruption is real and immediate challenges to the security and prosperity of our Pacific Island people. Corruption undermines the stability and security of societies, and it erodes democracy and ultimately undermines the rule of law. So Pilon is committed to supporting transparent and accountable legal frameworks in the region and also in upholding the rule of law. The importance of combating corruption in the region is reflected in the Pacific Leaders Board Declaration on Regional Security, which is something we actually work towards and align our work towards. So for our focus on combating corruption as a strategic priority, it provides a collective approach to support our leaders' commitment in this rule of law. So in line, as I've said earlier, on the Board Declaration Action Plan, we're now focusing on improving capacity to implement and enforce anti-corruption laws. We continue to work with other regional and international partners, such as the United Nations Pacific Regional Anti-Corruption UNPRAC project, and also Asia APG on anti-money laundering, to deliver activities including our regional workshops and trainings and developments on practical resources. So for this year, we've held a number of webinars and trainings on drugs and trafficking, anti-money laundering offenses, and also specializing on anti-money laundering to counter terrorism financing. As you can see up on the board, those are all the members of Pilon, and that is our annual meeting in 2023 in Nauru. And we have there the president of Nauru in France, and also just behind him is the Attorney General of Palau, Ernestine Rengil. I think she's here with me, and she's a member of Pilon. So what we do is we provide technical assistance and training on anti-money laundering and also counter-terrorism financing. Our message to our members and everyone is that it's very important to comply with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regulation. It's very important to ensure that these criminals don't facilitate these crimes. Next year, early in February, we will be hosting a 3-day workshop in Nandi, and this will be on asset forfeiture and confiscation. The alleged purpose of asset forfeiture is to disrupt criminal activity by confiscating assets that potentially could have been beneficial to the individual or organization benefiting from these proceeds of crime. Our second working group is cybercrime. We all know that internet connectivity deepens across the Pacific region, and collaborative action. Okay. Collaborative actions to combat cybercrime has been a priority for Pilon since 2016. So our working group has focused on efforts of building awareness of member countries on the urgent need to address cybercrime. And the most recent activities we've held is we're now at this very moment holding courses on digital forensics for both prosecutors and police enforcement officers. Our last one is our sexual and gender-based violence working group. And we all know that there's so much violence against women and children and girls and boys and vulnerable witnesses. So we've done a lot of work with leaders expressing the commitment to eradicate sexual and gender-based violence and reaffirming commitment to gender equality. The last one is Pacific Legislative Drafters Committee, and their objective is to advance the skills and capacity of legislative drafters in our Pilon member countries and also advance regional cooperation and networking amongst legislative drafters. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's a snapshot of our work, and we embrace a broader responsibility. We will always champion proceeding with our line of work on tackling crimes on corruption, cybercrime, sexual and gender-based violence with humility. We acknowledge that working to bring down criminals is complex, difficult, sometimes dangerous and life-threatening. But the work before us is hard and full of challenges, challenges we may not have control of, or maybe very little control of. And the knowledge that if we fall and fail that responsibility, who will take our place? Our action, our leadership is essential today to the cause of human security, and that we are responsible to protect development centered around our people with dignity and hope and a promise for a more secure tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Walter, for such a wonderful presentation. Let me now move on to our next presenter, Mr. Jonathan Takifayatau from the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, and he will be joining us virtually. So let me bring your attention and turn your attention to the screen. He's live presenting to us this morning.
I'm joining you this afternoon here in Tonga, as the Pacific as the region. We are prepared for the Forum Leaders Meeting, which will be taking place in 2 weeks' time. My time given to me this morning is approximately 7 minutes, so I'll try and take you through a short presentation that we have prepared. I'm sure the team in Palau would be putting up that very shortly. But I would like to, while we are waiting for the presentation, Your Excellencies, I wish to state at the outset that foreign policy, even though foreign policy and the global advocacy effort has traditionally been one of the key roles of the executive, the Pacific as a region, we have acknowledged the key role that parliamentarians and parliaments play, especially in undertaking some of the key global advocacy efforts on national and regional issues. And we also very much acknowledge that the role by parliaments, especially the key role in terms of your traditional areas of powers, and where it's the dependence of government in terms of the support in the legislative and budgetary powers. And this applies mainly to the ratifications of international treaties, and also the adoption of legislation at the national level that is in most cases aligned to international and regional priorities. And this has been really evident in the role of Parliament that you have taken on global advocacy endeavors on some of our key regional priorities, such as climate change, sea level rise, and we have seen how most countries in our region have taken a more bipartisan approach when we are approaching some of these key national, regional, and international issues. I'm not sure if you've seen the presentations from your end. But my task, as I was given, was to just take you through some of the issues, honorable speakers and honorable members of parliament, on the 2050 strategy. I believe Dr. Underwood has taken us through some of the key challenges that we are facing as a region. And that in itself has placed or given us the context in which the region is operating from. We are faced with geopolitical interest. We are also faced with climate change and other natural disasters that we are continually facing. Labor shortages. We are also faced with tightening monetary policy. These are multi-dimensional issues that we are faced with, Your Excellencies, which I believe you are well aware of. And these are also opportunities for us as a region to work together. Excellencies, I believe if I take you back, just 2019 in the leaders meeting in Tuvalu, leaders in their wisdom agreed that there is a need to develop a strategic plan for the region. So in 2022, when leaders met in Suva, Fiji, it was the first time that the leaders adopted and endorsed the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent. The strategy is guided by a vision, and a vision which states that the leaders have agreed on is specific leaders. Our vision is for a resilient Pacific, a region of peace, harmony, security, social inclusion, and prosperity that ensures that all Pacific people can lead free, healthy, and productive lives. The strategy, Your Excellencies, has been adopted by leaders, and there are 7 key thematic areas which is aligned which the strategy is focusing on. And I believe one of those the key aspect of that is on people-centered development, on leadership, and also on regional security. If I can request that we move on to the few more slides, please, on slide number 4. But ladies and gentlemen, those are some of the key work that we have undertaken. I believe this is for the first time we have a plan that has been owned and also member-led or driven in terms of the process of each formulation, and it's aligned to all the key development plans for the region. So in regards to the development of that strategic plan, in the meeting of leaders last year in Cook Islands, they have also endorsed the implementation plan that will take the region towards 2030. It's a 7-year plan that clearly articulates the key priorities and what we aim to prioritize in the next 7 years. I believe the one of the key advantages of having such a plan is in the past we've always, as the region, I believe that we've always been reactive, and since we do not own a plan or a region that does not really have a collective decision or unity on such on terms of our priorities, we've always been reactive in terms of what we do, and most of our partners have undertaken to deal with us bilaterally, and that in most cases have not to be on our advantage. But I believe the plan is an effort to ensure that we stand united in most of these key issues, and especially on the 7 thematic areas of the 2050 strategy. The plan, honorable speakers and honorable members of parliament, is aligned to all this I mentioned, to all the development plans, and for the first time ever, we also have a monitoring mechanism, whichever the monitoring report or the baseline report for the first time ever will be presented at the meeting here in Rarotonga in 2 weeks time, in terms of how we are doing in terms of the progress of the implementation of our plan. Aligned to this work, Your Excellency, is the leaders, while endorsing the 2050 strategy, also instructed that there is a need to review our regional architecture. We now have a plan, but it requires a cohesive and a well-coordinated implementation mechanism, and also requiring that we relook at how we are organized in terms of all the regional organization, our partners, and how we are organized ourselves to achieve the vision as articulated in the 2050 strategy. The current architecture, Your Excellency, is a very busy one at the moment. There's a quote from the 2013 review of the Pacific Plan, which I believe still rings true to this day, which states that the architecture in existence, it consists of a frame around a collection of existing organizations or regional organizations, rather than a deliberate design to shape these institutions in the way we relate to each other to achieve the aim that we want. And I had these, if I can go into the next slide, please. The next one, please. So this is currently where the architecture, it's so busy, and it's a bit messy in terms of how we situate ourselves. We have all the crop agencies, we have our partners, we have everyone trying to have a piece of the cake. And we acknowledge that in most instances, the needs are very clear to us in terms of what our people want. In terms of those offering those assistance, is very clear, those of our partners who can assist. It's us in the middle, in most cases, the regional organizations and those actors, which sometimes can be a stumbling block to those assistance flowing directly from the partners to those that need it most. And that is why we also acknowledge that in most of our members, they tend to try and just deal bilaterally. And that is basically some of the key issues that's driving the review of the regional architecture. If I can have the next slide, please. So the work stream of the RRA, which also be presented here in Rarotonga in 2 weeks' time, is a phase 1 of the work stream. We'll be reviewing in terms of the political, some of our political settlements, in terms of our grouping, our leadership, and key decision-making aspect. We know that there's some of our territories. I believe that Dr. Underwood has raised some critical issues in regards to some of our territories, and I'm happy to also report that Guam and American Samoa and few others, in terms of their applications for associate membership, will be tabled here for leaders' considerations when they meet here in Rarotonga in 2 weeks' time. As of now, as we are aware, only Tokelau and Wallace and Futuna are the two associate members territories. We'll also, the leaders will also have the time to review our governance mechanism, especially on how we cooperate and coordinate between the various regional entities. And in terms of our engagement, I believe this is an area or a space where noting the important roles played by the by Parliament and parliamentarians in terms of how PIF we can work together with the different bodies that has been established, and I'm happy to say that we've started some of those discussions with PIPG, and we are happy to proceed in terms of some of the key outcomes of those discussions. And also on the institutional processes in terms of on how we work together in terms of supporting some of our collective decision and actions and advocacy efforts. And lastly, we are also taking the time to review all our engagement and partnership as the forum members on how we liaise or interact with all our development partners. So, honorable speakers and members of parliament, those are some of the key work or decisions that leaders in their meeting in Tonga would be considering, and also if I can just go on to the next slide in terms of the last slide on some of the key issues for discussions this year is trying politically, continually trying to strengthen the leaders the relationship between our leaders, especially as we try and align ourselves to the 2050 vision. Regional governance, as I mentioned, in terms of the work on RRA or review of the regional architecture, on how we can work together, whether with the development partners or amongst ourselves as crop agencies, with the private sector, with the civil society, in trying to achieve the vision that has been endorsed by our leaders. In terms of influence, is trying to manage all the external influence and ensuring that we drive the priorities rather than letting our partners drive it for us. So that is key and something that the leaders in their own time and wisdom will be deliberating on here in Tonga. And lastly is on sustainable development. This is designing and defining our medium-term aspirations, as I mentioned, in terms of the 2050 implementation plan and how we are progressing as a region in trying to achieve the vision as articulated in the 2050 strategy. Honorable speakers, honorable members of parliament, distinguished guests, those are just a brief from the your Pacific Islands Secretariat, Forum Secretariat, and happy to take any questions later on. Thank you so much. Vinakasaka.
Thank you, Mr. Giannettini, for such a wonderful presentation. Let me now bring us to the next presenter. Mr. Albert Seluca from the Pacific Community, who is here with us, so we'll see him in person. Thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Iai, tūma welo te mamalu o te whale, ko no whaki ana tūlanga kese, a tūlanga whakamate a katoa i loa, amana i a katoa koutou, i te tae au manu i a tēnei te atua. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I acknowledge the landowners and the people of Palau, upon whose land we are gathered in the present moment. And I also acknowledge the body of and the wealth of knowledge in the room. Some are more knowledgeable on the topics that I'm going to speak about, and I give them due acknowledgement at this stage. My purpose is to tell you a story, maybe share some information about the people-centered approach to development and its value as an anchor to addressing human security issues in our region. My presentation will be structured as follows. I'll talk about the people-centered approach at SPC, at the Pacific Community, its recognition, value, and application, what it looks like in action, maybe 3 stories in that regard, and also the link between the people-centered approach and human security. And finally, we'll offer some thoughts on parliaments and the people-centered approach. I do so from the perspective of a particular division called the Human Rights and Social Development Division. And as you know, as most of you know, the Pacific Community, SPC, is the principal scientific and technical organization supporting development in our region. As a Pacific organization, SPC, we interweave science, technology, and innovation with cultural wisdom and indigenous knowledge for our region's collective betterment to serve our people in the Blue Pacific across its 27 members. Some of you may know the division that I work under. It used to be called the Regional Rights Resource Team, RRT, and in 2020 it was merged with the Social Development Program and also with the Pacific Women Lead Program. So together, and they are now collectively known as the Human Rights and Social Development Division. The merger says a lot about the coming together of key areas of work that once were within the mandate of each of these programs: human rights, gender mainstreaming, gender equality, culture, and women's economic empowerment. Now, a people-centered approach to development is generally regarded as a strategy that places individuals and the environment at the heart of all aspects of development, including planning, implementation, decision-making, etc. This approach aims to ensure sustainable economic and development growth. At SPC, the definition of the people-centered approach, I'll be using the acronym the PCA, goes beyond this generic definition. Through the work of its Human Rights and Social Development Division, the PCA signifies the pursuit and implementation of concepts and principles rooted in the value of respect, protection, promotion, and the fulfillment of the rights of Pacific people in all their diversities. And I acknowledge the comments by our guest, our keynote speaker. Dignity is also embedded in that approach. The PCA includes the application of a human rights-based approach to development, gender equality, and social inclusion. It integrates the principle of culture for development across people, operations, and programs within the organization. This comprehensive approach ensures a holistic and inclusive development process that respects and upholds the diverse rights and culture of the Pacific peoples. But why a people-centered approach? We offer the following answers to ensure that we do not perpetuate or exacerbate negative social norms or discrimination. More importantly, to recognize and promote culture, Pacific culture, as an enabler and driver for sustainable development. In its value proposition, the Pacific Community, SPC, supports sustainable development by applying a people-centered approach. The people-centered approach also, the PCA, is also an integral part of SPC's social and environmental responsibility. It is a key objective under its SER policy to promote and drive continuous improvement of SPC's social and environmental performance by embedding a people-centered approach across all its programs. The aim is to incorporate human rights, gender inclusion, and social inclusion and cultural development in all aspects of SPC's work. The people-centered approach is also explicitly should I say, mentioned in the text of the divisional plans within the structures within the organization. Our division is an example of one, and we say the people-centered approach is in our DNA. It informs the way we work on a day-to-day basis. Other divisions also make reference to it, and that seems to be the trend. Whatever divisional plan that comes up in the present period also cite the people-centered approach as an approach to implement its vision and activities throughout the strategic, the divisional plans work program. It is also embedded in the structures within the organization. For example, there is a division, such as the Human Rights and Social Development Division, explicitly established to promote the application of the PCA, and there is an explicit objective in that regard. Another example from other divisions include a Scaling Up Pacific Adaptation project that was run by one of our divisions called the Geoscience and Energy and Maritime Division. And that project also applied the people-centered approach throughout the project management cycle, using a checklist. So there are tools in place within the organization that also promote the application of the people-centered approach. Communities of practice are also established. Help desks are also established within the organization to provide support. But as I explain these, please be mindful that I'm talking about the inwards-facing work of the organization to promote the people-centered approach within its operations and programs. Finally, the PCA also plays a crucial role in creating a safe workplace for SPC staff. It promotes a workplace environment that is free from harmful and/or inappropriate behavior such as sexual exploitation, abuse, bullying, harassment, and domestic violence, enabling staff to live SPC values. At SPC, the people-centered approach encompasses the application of a human rights-based approach to development, gender equality, and social inclusion. This comprehensive approach ensures inclusive development and respects and upholds the diverse rights of our Pacific people. Let me provide some few examples of the PCA in action. Firstly, as an integrated framework, the people-centered approach constitutes a comprehensive body of knowledge within SPC staff that they can use to formulate and implement technical and contextual advice and assistance to addressing the multifaceted challenges faced by our member states. So, as you would know, in the days of the Regional Rights Resource Team, there was support given to the drafting of specific legislation to address the problem of family violence, and most of our countries in the room each have country-specific legislation in that regard. So the components of the PCA can be seen in action as we reflect on this area of the work of the division, but also through the current work of the regional working group, which continues to provide that support beyond the enactment of these legislation and into the implementation phase of these pieces of legislation. So in this respect, human rights considerations continue to be relevant and informs our technical assistance to survivors of violence, a topic that will be unpacked further throughout the week. The promotion of gender equality and social inclusion, making sure there is access to justice for survivors of those in intimate partner relationships. And of course, to design programs to address the harmful cultural beliefs and practices that pose barriers to accessing justice. Therefore, the people-centered approach as an integrative framework hosts interrelated and interconnected concepts such as human rights, gender equality, and culture is clearly visible in the work around family violence supported by the Pacific community. There is also a planet checklist intended to help guide project plans to incorporate a people-centered approach, and this has been used, as I mentioned earlier, through projects in climate change. Planet being participation. L mean link to rights. A, accountability. Clear roles and responsibilities are defined within projects, steering committees. Non-discrimination. N, empowerment and transformational change. Of these acronyms, the letters of planet, one of the areas perhaps needs a little bit more work or investment of time and energy to ensure its progressive realization in the actions that we do, and that is in relation to the link to rights. Even although some of the projects are able to state as an objective the realization of a human rights linked to a development goal, sometimes we need activities to flow further than that to enable linkages to national development processes. In that regard, the National Human Rights Task Forces of one particular country in our region is keen to explore the utilization of technology to enhance the participation of itself in the human rights treaty process, as well as people using technology to be able to contribute to the data collected on human rights issues. And this has been tested in countries such as Samoa through the SADATA project, and also a country venturing into this space is Kiribati, using the Impact OSS platform hosted by Project Governance. Now, from these three examples, I think we can draw that PCA is an anchor for addressing human security in our region. Safe homes, safe domestic houses, relationships is essential for human security. Promotion of food and water security in the space of climate change, as I mentioned earlier, implemented by one of the divisions using planet principles, is a testament to that as well. And also the building the capabilities of our national human rights mechanisms to utilize data to enhance their participation in international forums for reporting is also evidence of how the people-centered approach can address human security. So to conclude, I pose a question to myself. Parliaments and the evolution and contextualization of the PCA, the gray area. For too many, I think some of you can relate. Whenever we engage with the topic of human rights, there is always some times in the room, in the audience, some tension. It being regarded as a foreign concept. Those are the conversations still happen in the spaces that we interact in. And also, some call for its contextualization. I use the phrase, the gray area, and I draw, if you may allow, a concept from my own country in Tuvalu called the Ulusina, the gray areas in the community. They are usually referred to as the one who hold that body of knowledge with certain levels of wisdom. In the space of our engagement with the people-centered approach, we know we have the technical skills and knowledge to apply human rights, gender equality. We speak that language, but what we lack is culture, Pacific culture, as the enabler. And therefore, in that space, we see a fertile space for parliamentarians to engage in. That gray area, and I use the word gray, please allow me to use this analogy, the gray hairs in the community. We need the wisdom to guide that relationship for the progressive realization of the people-centered approach in our region. I'll leave you with that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saluka, for such a wonderful presentation. We are now moving on to our next topic, preserving Pacific culture at the time of extreme globalization. And with that, I would invite our next speaker, Reverend James Bagwan, Secretary General, Pacific Conference of Churches, and he will do presentation virtually. So, Reverend Bagwan, you have 7 minutes, and please, I may direct your attention to the screen for a virtual presentation.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Chairperson, and warm Pacific greetings, honorable speakers, members of parliament, and leaders. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the place that you have gathered and offer deep respects to the spirits of their ancestors, those who are custodians today, and those who will be guardians tomorrow. May the peace of God be with you all as you gather for this important discussion and gathering. I would also like to acknowledge the very important words shared by President Whips, also the keynote speaker, Dr. Underwood, and my fellow colleagues who have just taken the floor or the screen just before me. The Pacific Conference of Churches is in its 6th decade and currently serves 35 national church denominations, both Catholic and Protestant, and 11 national councils of churches across 19 Pacific Island countries and territories, accounting for some 70% of the Pacific's human population. And I speak to you today from Suva, the capital of Fiji, part of the province of Rewa, which is my homeland, and that of my wife and children, who are all proud Rewans and Fijians. At the same time, as someone with strong Indian ancestry, 84% according to Ancestry.com, and raised in the Pacific, and married to someone with Fijian or Itoke, Chinese, Irish, Welsh, Kiribati, Samoan, and again through the DNA people at Ancestry.com, Tongan and Maori ancestry. Our children are often described as Indo-Pacific in ethnicity, while also strongly connected to their mother's Kiribati culture, which is how she was raised. And I say that because culture is part of our identity as Pacific people. It is our reference point. It determines our worldview and is the key to our relationships with people and planet. Culture is the collective social capital of the community, which has been formed over generations. Culture is land, it is sea, it is language, it is law and law, the LAW and the LORE. It is kinship, it is ceremony. Spirituality in the Pacific, of course, as we all know, is an interweaving of these cultural aspects and is enhanced by Christianity and the many faith traditions of the world, which have grown roots in our diverse Pacific communities. These faith traditions are shared with the vast majority of those who share this planet. Spirituality, therefore, for Pacific people is integral to the way in which we interpret, we understand, and we interact with one another and with the natural world. But culture is not just the values and traditions that we hold dear. Culture is the way we reposit indigenous knowledge, indigenous science. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, which was shared a little bit earlier by my friend Shonetani, acknowledges that throughout the thematic areas and the various strategies, the role of indigenous knowledge and practice, processes, and protocols that can only serve to enhance regionalism and collaboration, but also enhance resilience in the face of climate change and other winds of change that blow across our liquid continent. And our keynote speaker referred to some of these winds of change that are blowing across the Blue Pacific. For example, the revival of traditional voyaging in our region has become a living metaphor of looking back in order to journey forward, and at the same time, a practical example of the value of traditional knowledge, sustainable sea transport, ocean health, planetary health. And we also see issues like, or practices such as traditional agricultural practices and food preservation, which have been a form of disaster risk reduction at a time when we are experiencing more and more intense weather systems as a result of climate change. However, as we've seen at this year's Pacific Festival, or Festival of Pacific Arts and Culture, FESPAC, which was held in Hawaii a few months ago, it was a celebration and affirmation of Pacific culture, but also a response to ongoing colonization, neo-colonization, and economic and cultural globalization. Some 23 years ago, at the dawn of this century, Pacific churches and representatives from the World Council of Churches gathered in Nadi in Fiji to reflect and respond to the consequences and processes of economic globalization. For Pacific churches, the negative impacts of economic globalization are incompatible with both Pacific culture and values, and, as we say, the reign of God and our discipleship of Christ. In this discussion, they perceive something seriously wrong with an economic system that produces so much suffering and poverty, exploitation of labor, and widespread environmental devastation. Their response was a document called the Island of Hope, which represented life-centered values which are deeply rooted in Pacific communities and which provide an orientation for a just and sustainable economy and a life of dignity. Things that are part of our Pacific culture: spirituality, family life, traditional economy, cultural values, mutual care and respect were components of this concept of the Island of Hope, which prioritized relationships, celebrated quality of life, and valued human beings and creation over the production of things. The Island of Hope was an alternative to the project of economic globalization, which entails domination through an unjust economic system. The Island of Hope recognized that while Western economies revolve around profit and economic growth, the traditional economies of the Pacific are concerned with people and total quality of their lives, caring and concern for others within the extended families, and compassion for all people, especially for the sick and the elderly. It's values of our Pacific communities. Respect, hospitality, generosity, and forgiveness are other marks of our Pacific traditional communities. They are marks of our culture. In Fiji, the Itoke name for this is Sole Solevaki. Another way of looking at it is placing community well-being as the indicator for development rather than gross domestic product. The Pacific Conference of Churches,
One more
now
minute,
a thematic
please.
focus based on the Kanak phrase of Dokamo, talks about well-being. And recently we have been looking to explore how well-being can be seen as an indicator for development in our region. And so, to basically wrap up, and I have shared this presentation and other resources with the team from UNDP, unless culture contributes to the framing of what we understand as development in our region for the well-being of Pacific communities, we need to really ask ourselves of whether we are honoring our cultures or whether we are allowing the tokenizing and commodification of our culture for the benefit for others. Is culture, our
Reverend,
Pacific
please
cultures,
wrap it up. 30 more seconds to go.
resistance and resilience, or is it being reduced to rhetoric? I leave that question for you to reflect on. Thank you very much for your time. God bless you.
Thank you, Reverend Bagwan, for such a wonderful presentation. Let me shift our attention to our next presenter, Dr. Philemon Manoni, Pacific Ocean Commissioner, and he will be presenting us through on our recording. So put on your earpiece if this comes in different language that you might need translation.
morning to everyone. Mulavinaka Yakwe. Although I regret that I cannot be with you in Palau today, I'm thankful for this opportunity, nevertheless, to connect with you through this platform. I'm actually on my way back to Palau after some medical attention. I would like to extend my warm Pacific greetings and to appreciate the invitation to share with you a few words from the office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner. Excellencies, since my last address to you in your gathering in Nuku'alofa last year, there have been notable developments, both in our region and beyond, in the cause for oceans. With the theme regionalism and its importance in addressing today's challenges, this morning, today, I'm thankful for this opportunity, nevertheless, to connect with you through this platform. I'm actually on my way back to Palau after some medical attention. I would like to extend my warm Pacific greetings and to appreciate the invitation to share with you a few words from the office of the Pacific Oceans Commissioner. Excellencies, since my last address to you in your gathering in Nuku'alofa last year, there have been notable developments, both in our region and beyond, in the cause for oceans. With the theme regionalism and its importance in addressing today's challenges for the Pacific, I am pleased to share my perspectives on people-centered development from the ocean's perspective. National governments within our ocean space have pursued various goals, achieving successes and gaining valuable lessons along the way. Regionally, we have worked together to protect our interests and to preserve our identities as vast, sustainable ocean states. On the international front, we have engaged in global discussions and negotiated agreements related to our oceans issues. Addressing challenges such as climate change, marine and plastic pollutions, illegal and unreported fishing, habitat destruction, and biodiversity loss requires robust regional cooperation. I commend your organization for the 2019 Tarohoi Declaration, which underscores our commitment to a resilient Pacific Ocean. After all, we are fighting for our survival as a people. The 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent outlines our regional cooperation strategy and action through 7 thematic pillars, with the ocean environment pillar focusing on strengthening collective regional partnerships. Our Pacific region has also contributed to the global effort in the negotiations, for instance, and the adoption of the BBNJ agreement. Congratulations to Palau and the Federated States of Micronesia for being the first UN members to ratify the agreement. Recently, OPOC, in collaboration with UN Dualos and other partners, convened the first Regional Oceans Governance and BBNJ workshop in Suva. We hope that forum members will follow suit in their review of the agreement in consideration of ratification. OPOC has planned a number of national BBNJ workshops and additional sessions before the end of the year. The growing interest and progress in the BBNJ agreement underscores its importance as a comprehensive framework in promoting sustainable oceans management. Excellencies, our regional successes in ocean management reflect the strength of regionalism. Since the forum's establishment in 1971, we have developed various frameworks, agreements, and plans that benefit our membership. Regional action enhances global efforts. OPOC, as you might have understood, is now preparing for the convening of the third UN Oceans Conference, which will be co-presided by France and Costa Rica, and to be held in Nice next year. This will be a crucial platform for advancing global ocean action and reinforcing commitments to Sustainable Development Goal 14, a goal that the Pacific fought hard for and achieved at the UN. This platform would be important in addressing critical issues like marine pollution, climate change, ecosystems conservation, and the like. This year, I'm also dedicated to promoting ocean literacy among our young people. We also aim to increase youth engagement on ocean matters and enhance capacity building initiatives in the ocean space. Excellencies, our collective resilience in the face of numerous challenges is commendable. Our achievements at the UNFCCC negotiations, the PB&J discussions, the plastics dialogue, and the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework demonstrate the value of our unified effort. This is our strength. While respecting diverse national interests within our organizations, within our family, we must also focus on our shared cultural values and shared goals to address common challenges. It is essential that we remain committed to regionalism. In the face of climate change, geopolitics, oceans priorities, we must rely on the strength of this collective. I urge that in your important roles as lawmakers, that you keep this in the back of your minds. This is particularly relevant as we look at translating concepts and global initiatives into robust legal frameworks that will work at the national level. As members review the BB&J agreement, for instance, which in many jurisdictions requires parliamentary assent, your role as the co-equal branch of government in reviewing these important initiatives and turning these initiatives into binding and enforceable measures at the regional and national level is paramount. Let us work together to safeguard our Blue Pacific for future generations. May we all unite in putting the interests of our people at the forefront of all development initiatives and be remembered as ancestors who stood together to protect our ocean, a symbol of our collective strength and our identity. The role you play as lawmakers is, of course, of paramount importance in turning these ambitions into reality. On that note, may I wish all of you a successful meeting in Palau, and it is indeed a privilege to be given the opportunity to address this important gathering. With that, Sulang, Komol Tada, and thank you very much for the opportunity to share a few words. Thank you.
Big thanks to Dr. Manoni for such a wonderful recording presentation. We are now moving on to our next topic, the benefits of regionalism. And with that, I'm going to open up the floor for Q&A, question and answer from the PIPG members and presenters. that was the last presentation, so we're now moving to Q&A and followed by maybe lunch thereafter. I don't see any reaction. Then if so, then I'll move on to opening the floor for delegations, contribution, or PIPG members. I'm sure we are all hungry. It's noon time. Some of you may have kind of still have a jet lag and maybe still tired from enjoying the scenery of the Rock Island and other places here in Palau. And if so, let me give the honorable delegation from Tonga.
First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the honorable speakers present at this PIPG meeting, and of course congratulate our hosts, PIPG 2024, Palau. My question is to the keynote speaker, Dr. Robert Underwood, regarding his comments about planning for the Pacific Blue Continent. He noted in his statement that there is a lack of an approach towards territories and non-sovereign actors. I would also add to that legislatures as well. But he didn't quite go as far as to present the way forward. I highlight from the other presentations that perhaps the regional framework review might be the ideal place to have those discussions. And secondly, I'd like to note that PIPG is a group where all Pacific Islands are included and welcome, whether you are territory, sovereign, or non-sovereign. So I'd just like to request if we can get a comment from Dr. Underwood, please.
Do you need further clarification from him? Dr. Underwood, can you step up and clarify that?
Thank you for that. I didn't hear the whole question, but I'm assuming it's about the participation of territories. That's the main issue. Well, it's a complicated question, and I certainly I'm grateful for. I'm not speaking on behalf of Guam as just somebody from Guam. I just want to clarify that. Now, my role here is to provoke thought and hopefully provoke answers. Not give you answers. So, but it is a significant point. It is something that we're always kind of trying to balance. My concern, of course, as a member of a society that is, the technical term for the political status of Guam and all U.S. territories is that they are unincorporated territories of the United States. That's their legal status. It means they are owned by the United States, but they're not part of the United States. So unincorporated is a very interesting political status. So the last thing I want is to be an unincorporated part of the Blue Continent. And that's what I'm hoping you can help us solve.
Chair, message is received. We understand. And I think as legislators, we have a responsibility to be as inclusive as possible in Blue Pacific.
Thank you, Speaker, for such a wonderful question. Unfortunately, the representative from Guam to the APIL had to leave last night due to other obligations that she has to meet today. So she left last night, so she's not here today. But the rest of the other members of the Northern Pacific legislatures are here as an observer. So it's a good, time that are here, and I can see the speaker from the marshal is sitting right across from me. So he's sitting in as an observer for this meeting, and hopefully something positive might come out after this. Thank you.
Let me add one more point. The senator who was here from Guam, who's not here, was my student in high school. So
I'm sorry, the representative who's sitting from the marshal who's here today is speaker's proxy. So, any other question? If there is no further question, I'll hand this over to the MC to direct us what to do next. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and congratulations for a great opening session. We now will break for lunch. Lunch will be served in the room across the hall there. If you see the designated staff, they would be more than happy to direct you to the right place. If I can also ask that everyone return by 1:50 so we can begin the afternoon portion at 2 p.m. Thank you, and enjoy your lunch. Lunch. Now it is time for our next session, our afternoon session. So at this time, I'd like to give the floor back to Chairman Delegate Marino.
Thank you, MC. We are now moving on to the next part of our program, an update on the progress of Vangatapu Declaration. I'm going to be calling out one country at a time. So just be prepared. You have 3 minutes each to present. Host Palau will be the last. So I guess we're all ready to begin this afternoon session. So having said that, let me begin by recognizing Cook Island as be the first to report.
Kia ran tātou katotoa I te aroanga o te atua, Miss King, distinguished guests, honourable members, honourable speakers, and to our host, kia ora. I believe that the declaration that was signed it last year in Tonga was aimed to address the effect of climate change in our regions. And we are pleased to report positively development. Please bear with me. As members who were presented at the PIPG last year, had pressing matter back home, leading to our absence due to the last-minute alteration in our attending party. I've been requested to participate in their place. Since the declaration was signed, the Cook Island has scaled up its efforts, reducing greenhouse gas emission. Particularly, the Cook Island have invested heavily in renewable energy, including solar power in the outer islands of the Cook Islands, which has helped to reduce our reliance on fossil fuel and decrease our carbon footprint. Additionally, the Cook Islands have implemented policy and strategy aimed at reducing waste and promoting sustainable land use and practice. Our efforts has been recognized globally, and we are proud to report that we have been awarded for our sustainable development initiatives. Furthermore, the Cook Islands, alongside other Pacific Islander countries, territories, have continued to raise their voice in international forums, calling the ambitious and urgent action to combat climate change. The Whangatapu Declaration has enabled us to speak with our united voice, highlighting the unique challenges faced by small island states in the face of the global climate crisis. Importantly, we have also made progress steps in strengthening our community resilience, investing in early warning system, enhance our disaster preparedness. They will be enable us to better respond to extreme weather events and other natural disasters, which are likely to increase in frequency and intensity due to climate change. In conclusion, the Cook Island wants to reiterate our commitment to the principal Whangatapu Declaration. We will continue to work towards our sustainable future for the Cook Islands and the wider Pacific region. Building on the progress made since the declaration was signed, together we can make difference and protect our beautiful island home for our generation to come. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Cook Island. Coming up next, the Fiji.
Thank you. His Excellency the President of the Republic of Palau, the Honorable Serengel Whips Jr., Honorable Speakers of Parliament and Honorable Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, esteemed panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Fiji, or in the vernacular, Bula Vinaka. On behalf of the Fijian Parliament, it gives me great pleasure and privilege to sincerely thank our generous hosts for allowing us to convene in the beautiful Koro, Palau, for the 4th Pacific Islands Parliamentary Group Conference, a platform which undoubtedly aims to strengthen cooperation, partnership amongst our Pacific parliaments that share similar geographical global challenges and aspirations. It is my noble task this afternoon to reflect and share on some notable progress that the Fijian Parliament has undertaken to translate the principles of the Whangatapu Declaration into concrete and actions and policies. The Whangatapu Declaration, a landmark commitment underscoring Our dedication to climate action and sustainable development represents a bold and united stance against the existential threat of climate change. The Whangatapu Declaration is just not a good document, but a pledge to protect our Pacific home, ensuring that our islands remain resilient in the face of rising seas, extreme weather, and climate challenges. Fiji, as a small island developing state, better known as SEEDS, in the large Pacific Ocean, is facing the rising challenges imposed by the adverse impacts of climate change. With rising temperatures and sea levels, and in 1992 at the Rio Global Summit in Brazil, we as SEEDS were accorded the global recognition of being the most vulnerable group of 39 countries in the UN family of nations. Since Rio, the existential threats have been exacerbated, and its impact have not only adversely affected SEEDS, but also by other developing countries with small population and economies, and threatening our very peaceful existence. Fiji's Climate Change Act establishes the comprehensive response to climate change, including the regulations and governance of the national response, and as well as system for the measurement, reporting, and verification of greenhouse gas emissions, and revised laws to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The Parliament of Fiji passed an allocation of about 500,000 Fijian dollars for the implementation of this act. The Fiji Parliament has authorized funding and support for climate resilience projects across the country. In July, the Fijian Parliament scrutinized and passed the 2024-2025 national budget that includes the creation of a ministry dedicated to environment and climate change. Fiji's Ministry of Environment and Climate Change will continue to enforce environmental legislation, policies and programs to promote sustainable development and build national resilience to the impact of climate change. The Ministry has allocated a budget of 9.7 million to increase public awareness of environmental priorities and climate change issues, oversee the implementation and compliance with relevant legislations and support of Fiji's obligations under international conventions and treaties. The Whangatapu Declaration commits Parliament to strategies for a greener Parliament. In 2023, our Parliament eliminated the use of single-use plastic bottles in the Parliament chambers and substituted with reusable water bottles. Our e-Parliament initiative was further amplified by the reduction of printed documents by 80%. Members of Parliament now receive electronic copies of the documents that are tabled in the House. Only hard copies of the order paper are provided to them. Parliament will continue to adopt greener policies and embrace a culture of sustainability to help address the climate crisis and pave the way for stronger climate action. In line with the Whangatapu Declaration's call for sustainable energy solutions, Fiji has significantly invested in renewable energy resources. The expansion of solar and wind power projects not only reduces our dependence on fossil fuels, but also sets an example for other nations within the region. At the COP of 28, the Fijian government signed the Global Renewal and Energy Efficient Pledge to triple the world's installed renewable energy by 2030 and to double global average energy efficiency improvements every year until 2030. Fiji's national energy policy emphasizes the importance of renewable energy and aims to increase the share of renewable energy of the renewable energy mix. The country's commitment to the Paris Agreement includes specific targets for reducing carbon emissions and increasing the use of renewable energy, and Fiji has several renewable energy projects through the private sector providers in the new budget. Fiji has continued to actively participate in regional and global forums, advocating for stronger climate actions and support for Pacific Island nations. Our commitment to the Whangatapu Declarations extends beyond our borders as we work within our Pacific neighbors and international partners to address the global climate crisis. In the coming months, Fiji will focus on the following priorities. First one is to deliver on the strategic implementation roadmap for Fiji's Climate Change Act to increase collaboration efforts across all sectors. Loss and Damage Fund and the new Pacific Resilience Facility and other international climate finance mechanisms, and thirdly, the effectively engage in global negotiations on the new quantified collective goal for climate finance in preparation for COP29. Our progress thus far is a testament to our strong will and resilience, but ongoing efforts and innovations are essential to achieve the full intent of the Whangatapu Declaration. In closing, I remain adamant that the parliaments and parliamentarians through the PIPG platform have a critical role to advocate with our governments to effectively address the scourge and threats of climate change and help shape the adaptation and resilience building narratives into a long-term sustainable livelihoods and developments. We need to keep up the good fight. Thank you, and Vinao Valeu.
Thank you, Fiji, for the report. Moving on to French Polynesian. You have 3 minutes for the report.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président de la Chambre des délégués, honorable Sabino Anastasio, honorable membre du groupe des parlements des îles du Pacifique, mes chers collègues, Yorana Itotato Nei Farerida Iteye Taramhana. Dans le cadre de la déclaration de Whangatapu adoptée lors de la 3e conférence du GPIP à Tonga, j'ai le plaisir de partager avec vous les avancées ainsi que les actions réalisées dans sa mise en œuvre en Polynésie française, que j'appellerai Mahuinui pour faire honneur au cadre identitaire et culturel de notre rencontre. Ainsi, le premier engagement relatif à la limitation du réchauffement climatique a constitué la priorité majeure de mon gouvernement et des élus de l'institution que je représente. À ce titre, bien que le premier plan climat-énergie 2015-2020 ait représenté 56% des 33 actions réalisées durant cette période, les nombreux défis rencontrés lors de sa mise en œuvre nous ont permis d'éviter, lors de l'élaboration du nouveau plan climat-énergie 2022-2030, les nombreuses déconvenues du plan précédent et offrir dans cette nouvelle perspective une stratégie d'action plus inclusive et transversale. En matière de protection de l'environnement et de la biodiversité, un certain nombre de mesures concrètes ont d'ores et déjà été actées. Ainsi, l'interdiction des sacs plastiques, instituée dès 2020, a récemment été élargie à certains autres produits élaborés à base de matières plastiques et d'aluminium, tels que la vaisselle plastique et métallique à usage unique, dont la production et la commercialisation seront désormais interdites dès l'année 2025. La création d'aires marines protégées ou encore la promotion de certaines pratiques durables tirées de nos savoirs traditionnels comme le rahui sont autant d'exemples qui traduisent notre engagement et notre profonde détermination à protéger nos ressources naturelles. Dans le domaine de l'énergie et de l'innovation, notre Assemblée a configuré le Code de l'énergie de la Polynésie pour l'adapter aux nouvelles préconisations de notre déclaration régionale en diversifiant l'offre d'aide publique à plusieurs sources de production d'énergie renouvelable telles que l'énergie solaire, l'énergie hydroélectrique, l'énergie thermique des mers et j'en passe. À titre d'exemple, l'adaptation de la réglementation urbanistique des bâtiments a permis d'améliorer leur efficacité énergétique et des projets innovants tels que le système SWAC pour le centre hospitalier de Polynésie ainsi que les projets de fermes solaires ont déjà été réalisés afin de tendre vers des objectifs de production énergétique propre et durable. S'agissant des actions de coopération et de financement, la Polynésie a pu obtenir la contribution des fonds de transition énergétique ainsi que les financements relatifs aux projets prioritaires de développement durable portés par les investisseurs privés du pays. Les programmes régionaux successifs, Rescue, Intègre, puis Protège, financés par le Fonds européen de développement européen et mis en œuvre par la Communauté du Pacifique et le PROE, ont permis de renforcer notre gestion des ressources naturelles et notre résilience face au changement climatique. Des partenariats avec The Nature Conservancy, l'IFREMER ou encore l'initiative Kiwa et les projets réalisés localement sur la préservation de la ressource en eau et le développement d'un programme de protection de la biodiversité démontrent que la coopération régionale et internationale apporte un soutien essentiel à nos projets d'adaptation. Des mesures réglementaires et législatives importantes ont également été adoptées par mon institution, comme les plans de gestion des espaces marins ou encore la réglementation des zones de pêche. La protection de notre souveraineté et de nos ressources naturelles face à la montée du niveau de la mer est une priorité absolue, soutenue par les nombreuses actions locales, régionales et internationales. En conclusion, malgré les défis rencontrés, la Polynésie est fermement déterminée à respecter les engagements de la déclaration de Whangatapu en travaillant activement pour un avenir durable et résilient. Enfin, honorables membres du GPIP, chers collègues, il est crucial de souligner l'importance du renforcement du groupe des parlements des îles du Pacifique. Nous pensons effectivement que ce processus est essentiel pour combler l'absence des institutions parlementaires dans l'environnement institutionnel de l'Océanie et du Grand Pacifique. En élargissant le mandat géographique, thématique et institutionnel du GPIP, la transparence, la responsabilité et l'inclusivité des institutions à travers toute la région Pacifique pourront ainsi être renforcées. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et votre engagement continu envers nos objectifs communs. Maruru et Best Solong.
Thank you, French Polynesian. Now we move on to the next report from Hawaii.
Aloha mai kako, aloha. Hawaii's dedication to climate action and the Whangatapu Declaration includes the commitment of Hawaii to the Paris Climate Agreement, the establishment of the 2045 net zero goal, which aims to transition Hawaii to a carbon neutral state by the year 2045. It also includes the establishment of the Hawaii Climate Change and Adaptation Commission to collaborate, draft plans, and execute, among other things, a Hawaii greenhouse gas inventory, greenhouse gas sequestration task force, and the Hawaii Clean Energy Initiative. This Clean Energy Initiative includes the implementation of the 2045 net zero goals. And while this effort is challenged by the aftermath of the wildfires on Maui and the destruction of our original capital, Lahaina, the result has been an immediate pivot to resiliency to account for wildfire and climate disaster mitigation, particularly in our electrical utility grid. However, there are also bright spots in our current energy transition. One is the development of agrivoltaics, which is the integration of large-scale solar farms onto agricultural lands in a way that produces food and energy. Several of those pilots are underway on the island of Oahu, and the integration of grid-scale battery backup to better balance the development and integration of solar energy from both solar farms, but also the implementation of rooftop solar on our residences, and particularly our government infrastructure, where the transition is especially helpful in the controlling of costs. In addition, these commitments have included the enactment of climate action plans by our local island municipal governments, of which there are 4. These all represent a significant effort on Hawaii's part to dedicate and prioritize climate action. And we look forward to continued collaboration and dialogue amongst our colleagues here at PIPG. And I thank you for your time. Mahalo.
Thank you very much, Hawaii. And now we move on to Niue.
Kalofalahia from Niue. I would like to acknowledge the Palau Parliament for hosting this conference in your beautiful island. With regards to Whangatapu Declaration in Tonga last year, unfortunately, we came late to the meeting, 2 hours before it was closed. We didn't participate fully on our discussion, but we surely appreciate the efforts given into climate change, disaster, and the impacts of science actions. Within our island, we have supported all the issues with Whangatapu declarations. And with our renewable energy, we are targeting 2030 as 80%, it will be 80% renewable energy. And we're very thankful for Australia, New Zealand, and the partners who are assisting us with solar energy at the present moment. With regards to food security, we are doing our best with feral pigs, which is the problems with our plantations. And with regards to the ocean, we have established a non-harvest area. 40% of our EEZ, as some of you may have known, that we have earmarked our 40% of our EEZ to be non-going fishing, or so we have been contributing to that, which will help the community in doing projects to manage fishing areas, not only the ocean, the big EEZ, but also the coastal areas. Last year, we passed a Family Relations Act 2017, which involves in family values, where we don't usually have that before. Our waste recycling at the moment, we are
doing a waste management, and we are in the process of doing recycling, and then we'll send it away to New Zealand for disposal. The problem we have at the moment is the old worn out vehicles that we are looking at getting a piler to crush those vehicles. Because every boat that comes to New Zealand, there's more than 20 new vehicles coming to the island. Climate change is here to stay. The more we talked about it, the more we will notice that it is here to stay, and we have to adapt to our own small islands. I wish to thank you for giving me the opportunity to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, Niue. Move on to Rapa Nui.
Yorana Tatou. First of all, I would like to express on behalf of Mr. Edmunds our most sincere gratitude to Palau, its parliament, and its people for such a kind reception and for opening this space of conversation. And with respect to the objectives established by the Whangatapu Declaration, we're pleased to communicate that Rapa Nui's development has gone hand in hand with global, regional, and national objectives and their guiding instruments. In this sense, the Whangatapu Declaration is in dialogue with the current actions being implemented in our island territory. Just this week, the community consultation process on the management plan for the Rapa Nui Marine Protected Area and Motumotiro Hiva was successfully closed. This is a fundamental instrument for the marine conservation of our territory, allowing the effective implementation of conservation actions that go hand in hand with our ancestral knowledge and costumes. Early this year, Rapa Nui also hosted an international summit to discuss the serious effects and impacts of microplastics in our oceans. This summit has been translated into specific actions both inside and outside of our territory. We are working closely with the Inter-American Development Bank, which will finance the implementation of our climate action plan and the first major project to change our energy supply matrix. Finally, we have adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, in an active and multi-scale manner. Last year, Rapa Nui conducted a voluntary reporting on its compliance with the SDGs at the UN headquarters. Finally, we would like to emphasize that the Whangatapu Declaration, along with many others, have been a guiding document in dialogue with a regenerative and transformative process that Rapa Nui is pushing towards a greener, resilient, and sustainable future. The challenges are many, and of course, we cannot address each and every single one of them. However, we're making steady progress on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rapa Nui. Now we move on to...
Thank you, Chair. Someone else has just revised its Hello, thank you. Yes, Solomon Island has just revised its national climate change policy, just in reference to the Whangatapu Declaration. It has came up with a 10 years climate change policy. Mainly, this has been a significant step in the country's effort to address impacts of climate change while promoting sustainable development and economic growth. With this, Mr. Chair, Solomon Islands has came up with strategies, especially with areas to coastal conservation areas. We have managed to revise the Marine Protected Areas Act. Now we have 4 and 1 for marine protected areas, and that's the biggest one. Sorry. The biggest one, you might hear about the Anofan marine area, where a lot of studies have been conducted in the Solomon Islands. Currently, is it clear? Yep. Currently, I think one of the biggest achievements of the country is the single-use plastic ban regulation, where we started that in 2023, and the government has implemented the single-use plastic ban regulation to ban the import, manufacture, distribution, sale, and supply of single-use plastics in the Solomon Islands. The regulation was signed by the Minister of Environment, Climate Change, Disaster Management, and Meteorology on the 1st of September 2023. We also have the litter ban laws, and especially with regards to our urban areas, which mainly carried out by the Onyara City Council. Solomon Islands has implemented measures to address the issue of littering and waste management, given the environmental concerns in process, particularly in country with such rich biodiversity like us. The key aspects of the litter ban laws and policies include Environmental Health Act, Public Health Ordinance, currently, we are conducting inquiry into the state of environment. We have a report in year 2019. So it is a responsibility for us, especially the parliamentary committee chairperson for climate change and conservation, which is a task for us. It's good that we reach out to other areas where we can help our parliamentarians, how we can address climate change issues that is affecting us in the Pacific. I think that's all from us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Off. Okay, there you go. Thank you, Solomon Island. Now we move on to Tonga.
Malolele, and good afternoon to you all. Thank you, Chair. Distinguished speakers and members, may I please observe all protocol before presenting Tonga's country report. The 20 commitments of the Whangatapu Declaration are essentially a pledge to develop, strengthen, and empower the Pacific Island countries in battling harsh impacts of climate change, reducing the risks of natural disasters, and implementing national, regional, and international legislation and policies towards providing international assistance for Pacific Island countries who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. I also note Dr. Robert Underwood's keynote address. The second crisis in our region of the Pacific is also the geopolitical great power competition, which we might have to look at expanding the matters observed under the Whangatapu Declaration. Tonga and the Parliament has been actively implementing the commitments in the Whangatapu Declaration, and we're very pleased to report the following developments since the third PIPG hosted in Nuku'alofa, Tongatapu. Most notably, the 1 million tree initiative that our government concluded as part of the nationally determined contributions reported to the last COP. The attendance of members of parliament and members of the Environment and Climate Change Committee of our parliament at COP28. Parliament's own initiative, tree planting initiative funded by the Chinese embassy to empower nurseries and the planting of sustainable trees in the country. The support of Parliament staff and members in the planting of 20,000 mangroves on the main island. And lastly, the Climate Change and Human Rights Advisory Opinion 1-year anniversary at the International Court of Justice. This landmark case and decision was marked in March earlier this year as the one-year anniversary. And in fact, for Tonga, this also marked the 1-year anniversary of our first ever written statement to the ICJ, based around the incorporation of Tonga's priorities for climate change and the impacts that it's encountered both on a national and on a regional level. It drew attention to the court of Tonga's plight, both land, sea, and air, the situation amongst the people, the impacts on the economy, and of course on future generations. I know my 3 minutes up. We have 6 pages from Tonga, which we will submit in full for you to read this afternoon. So thank you, Speaker. So submit our report. Malo.
Thank you very much, Tonga, for your report. Now we'll move on to Tuvalu.
Thank you, Chair. Talofa. It is an honor and privilege to present I would like personally to, with my delegation, to thank, through you, Chair, for the hospitality of the Parliament of Palau in hosting us for this conference. In as far as the Fongatapu Declaration, we believe that it was emphasized that the burning issue of the climate change and the impact of climate change in small island states like Tuvalu. We are so vulnerable to the impact of climate change. It is important to clarify the responsibilities of states more clearly under international law with respect to climate change. In this regard, the Small Islands Commission on Climate Change and International Law, a joint initiative of Tuvalu and Nanticoa and Barbuda, has recently obtained an advisory opinion from the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, the Convention IDLOS, on obligation of states with regard to marine pollution caused by climate change. This follows and complements the Vanuatu advisory opinion issued last year by the International Court of Justice on climate change and human rights. Another advisory opinion being sought from the ICJ through the Rising Nation Initiative, another initiative supported by Tuvalu for the permanency of statehood, sovereignty, and territorial integrity due to climate change and sea level rise. All this work around climate change and international law seeks to ensure that the Pacific Island countries and their people are able to live and enjoy their culture, heritage, statehood, and sovereignty in perpetuity, regardless of the impact of climate change and sea level rise. As a part response to the impact of climate change, Tuvalu has taken steps to alleviate its bilateral relationship with Australia to a more comprehensive and advanced partnership through signing of the Tuvalu Union Treaty. The Tuvalu Union Treaty is a treaty that allows Tuvalu to, because of climate change, to be able to go to Australia, work, study, and given the residential permit from Australia. The government is still advocating this with the people consultation to prepare for that, to implement that treaty. I must also report that Tuvalu has making significant strides in the renewable energy sector with new projects aimed at reducing reliance on imported fuels, fossil fuel, and combating climate change. In May 2024, the government celebrated a major milestone with the completion of a substantial solar farm on the capital island, the main island. The development marks a critical step towards the nation's goal of achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. Just lately this month, there is also a workshop on the regional level run by SPREP for the management of waste. It was held in Tuvalu. It's around about 100 participants from the region. It was a hard time for Tuvalu to accommodate these people because the place is so small. Yeah, but nonetheless, we managed to accommodate the participants. It's so encouraging the way the SPREP has put forward to develop the policies for the disposal of waste in the region. I think that's all from Tuvalu. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuvalu. Now we move on to Wallis and Fatuna. For 3.
Merci, Président. Allez. Cher Président et Parlement de la région Pacifique, Malole Maoli, Malkataki, Mesdames et Messieurs, je vous adresse mes salutations, les plus chaleureuses salutations de la part de mes îles de Wallis et Futuna. C'est un honneur pour moi de vous parler aujourd'hui au nom de Wallis et Futuna, qui est un territoire qui est vulnérable aux impacts des changements climatiques en raison de son insularité et de sa faible attitude. Pour répondre à ces défis et par rapport à la déclaration de Fangtab, plusieurs initiatives en matière de protection environnementale et de résilience climatique ont été mises en place et sont en cours. Par rapport à la gestion des ressources naturelles, les autorités locales mettent en œuvre des politiques pour mieux gérer les ressources naturelles telles que l'eau et les sols. Ces politiques visent à promouvoir des pratiques agricoles durables et à protéger les écosystèmes marins et terrestres. Donc par rapport à ce point, on a mis en place des programmes de sensibilisation de l'utilisation de l'eau et le programme Protège. Ensuite, protection des écosystèmes marins. Wallis et Futuna bénéficie de programmes visant à protéger les récifs coralliens et les zones maritimes. La création de zones marines protégées contribue à la préservation de la biodiversité marine et à la résilience des écosystèmes côtiers face aux impacts de changement climatique. Dans ce programme, on avait créé de zones ou de systèmes de décantation d'eau de pluie. Donc, vous avez, en troisième point, la planification urbaine et aménagement du territoire. Les projets de développement sont souvent soumis à des études d'impact environnemental pour minimiser leurs effets sur l'environnement. Les autorités locales intègrent également des critères de résilience climatique dans la planification urbaine. Donc, l'Assemblée territoriale de Wallis-et-Futuna a mis en place une délibération interdisant l'utilisation des sacs plastiques, les couverts plastiques, ainsi que les barquettes. Et la protection aussi de nos côtes par les enrochements, programme d'enrochement. La sensibilisation par rapport à l'éducation. Des programmes de sensibilisation de l'éducation sont mis en place pour informer les communautés locales sur les enjeux environnementaux et climatiques. Cela inclut des initiatives scolaires et communautaires pour engager des comportements plus durables. Par rapport à ce point, on a mis en place des programmes de tri sélectif dans les écoles. Et pour vous citer, que Wallis-et-Futuna a eu le premier prix, le meilleur prix du programme de tri sélectif dans le plastique en 2020. Par rapport au partenariat avec les organisations internationales, Wallis-et-Futuna collabore avec des organisations internationales et des agences françaises comme l'OFB, l'Organisation française sur la biodiversité. La gestion des risques catastrophiques. La région met en œuvre des stratégies pour mieux gérer les risques associés aux catastrophes naturelles, telles que les cyclones et les inondations. Cela inclut la préparation et la réponse aux catastrophes, ainsi que des mesures d'atténuation pour réduire les impacts. Par rapport au développement durable, il y a un effort pour intégrer des principes de développement durable dans la politique locale. Cela peut inclure la promotion de l'utilisation des énergies renouvelables. L'objectif de Wallis-et-Futuna est de développer plusieurs fermes photovoltaïques pour que Wallis-et-Futuna atteigne en 2030 une utilisation de l'énergie solaire à hauteur de 50%. Ces initiatives témoignent d'un engagement croissant pour faire face aux défis environnementaux et climatiques spécifiques à Wallis-et-Futuna, en mettant l'accent sur la protection des ressources naturelles et la résilience des communautés locales. C'est un facteur qui pourrait mesurer cette prise de conscience croissante. C'est la multiplication des associations de protection de l'environnement sur nos îles et une participation. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Wallis and Futuna. Now we're going to our last report for this afternoon, the Republic of Palau.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished delegates, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. The 2023 Whangatapu Declaration and the 2019 Taraho Declaration embodies the concerns we share and the commitments we have made by consensus to combat and mitigate threats that stem from climate change and the value and respect each and every one of us has for protecting the Blue Pacific environment and the finite resources. As we reflect back on the collective commitments we've made, Palau is pleased to provide you with a brief update on the work we have undertaken and results achieved. First, in the Whangatapu Declaration, we called on members to sign and ratify the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdictions. Short is BBNJ. On January 22, 2024, Palau became the first to ratify a United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, also referred to as the BBNJ Agreement. As you may recall, the BBNJ Agreement is the first comprehensive cross-sectoral ocean treaty since the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea was adopted more than 40 years ago, and has the potential to make crucial contributions to addressing the triple planetary crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution, as well as to achieving ocean-related goals and targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Also in the Whangatapu Declaration, we agreed to commit to protecting persons affected by climate change by acting locally, nationally, and internationally, particularly in supporting treaties with equal objectives. In February 2024, Palau's Office of Climate Change, in collaboration with multiple partners, launched the second edition of the Palau Climate Change Policy. This policy serves as the national guide to address climate change challenges with more innovation and collaboration. In addition, the government is working on its National Adaptation Plan, a bigger project that would include regional consultations, data development, modeling, and monitoring, and among other key needed actions. This plan is meant to be a collaborative effort to safeguard the environment in a holistic and strategic way to protect the livelihood, the culture, and the well-being of our communities. Lastly, as island nations, climate change constitutes one of the biggest threats to our security, economies, and social development. As mentioned by the good representative from Tuvalu, in December 2022, Niue, Palau, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, and other non-Pacific Island members of the Commission of Small Island States on Climate Change and International Law asked the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea to render an advisory opinion on the obligations state parties to the United Nations on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS. And on June 2, 2024, history was made when the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea issued its first ever ruling that human-produced greenhouse emissions absorbed by the world's oceans are marine pollution. Importantly, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea also stated that nations must monitor and reduce emissions. Although the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea issued an advisory opinion that carries no legal weight, it is nonetheless a significant ruling. First, it's a historic ruling in terms of the fact that no other court has ruled on climate issue. Second, the International Tribunal Law of the Sea advisory opinion acknowledged that the responsibility that all nations have to protect the ocean. In future cases, this advisory opinion can and hopefully will uphold polluters accountable. Additionally, I think we can all take a step back and recognize that this decision is a testament to the strength we have when we come together and exercise our collective Pacific voice on climate change issues and the power we have to make a difference. In the Whangatapu Declaration, PIPG committed to actively promote and contribute to reducing plastic pollution, and to call on governments to support the mandate of the United Nations Environment Assembly to prepare a globally legally binding treaty to address plastic pollution. Prior to the Whangatapu and Taro Declaration, the Palau National Congress passed an anti-plastic legislation to reduce the use of plastic throughout the island, within the tourism industry and workplaces. Palau recognized that there is more work to be done to address plastic use on local, regional, and global level. Speaking at our ocean conference in Greece in April 2024, the President of Palau underscored the urgent need for a new plastics treaty to focus on the full life cycle of plastics, including controlling production rather than relying solely on the recycling to combat the plastic pollutions. With that, those few words, thank you, Chair, for your time, and thank you, everyone, for your attention.
Thank you, Palau, for your report. Looking at the time, we seem to have much, on time, or a little bit or more than we still have a lot of time left for us. So let me just give up a few minutes for any intervention here. If anyone would like to make a statement, the floor is open. All right, seems like everyone are just ready to move to the next. I think coming up is afternoon tea break, so I'll pass this on to the MC to give us a guidance there.
Thank you everyone for your reports. As mentioned by Chairman Marino, we will now break for afternoon tea, the same place where we had our lunch. I'd also like to announce that we will be doing a site visit to the National Capitol. The buses will be here at 3:30 p.m. right up in front. So right after the tea break, please make your way to the buses. I'd also like to remind everyone that it's about a 40-minute drive, so if you need to use any of the facilities, please make sure you do it before you get on the buses. So again, we're breaking for our afternoon tea. Please be prepared for the buses by 3:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone.